Salon, Massieu, you're good generals. You're in the French military. I'm your commander, president of the French government. Come with me. He reassigns them. Write that down. He reassigns them. Now that should have been a little bit of an indication as to what de Gaulle was up to next. He reassigned them back to France because he doesn't want them in Algeria because he knows kind of where things are going to be going from that point on. What is going to be going on from that point on? He is going to look at the situation, size things up, right? I mean, he's looking at this fight. Here's a little bit of detail. I mean, you had 400,000 French troops involved in this war, 180,000 Muslim Harkis. And yet, even though the FLN was beaten back, the thing was still going on, right? And they even had some pretty cool tactics. The French military came up with what was called the 5th Bureau. Let me tell you that story real quick. The 5th Bureau. The French military actually infiltrated the FLN with supposed turned supporters. But in fact, they were double agents and they were reporting back to the French military. And so all of those things helped him. And yet, here's de Gaulle. Let's give him credit. He looked at the situation. He's like, I don't think we can win this the way we want to win it. And I think the French public opinion is turned against it. And now with the power that I have as the French president, I can actually do something. Because I think what I'm going to do is going to get this thing resolved. And what is he planning on doing? Pulling the plug on the war in Algeria. Now, he's not just going to do it by fiat, not just going to say it like this is over now. No, he wants to make sure that there is elections, that the Algerian people are in favor of it. So they have a vote in Algeria. The Muslims are supportive of independence. The colonists are against it. But what percentage were the colons among the overall population in Algeria? Like 10%, yeah. So, but in France, when they have that referendum, in France, when they have the vote on independence for Algeria, 91% of the voters supported Algerian independence. If that's not a clear indication that the French are tired of fighting this Algerian war of independence. Now, of course, some of the folks are going, wait, we need to have a military coup against, and there were some that tried a military coup, right? I think, let me double check my notes here. Salon tried a military coup. General Salon tried a military coup in 1961. He failed. Think of it this way. In the Spanish Civil War, was Franco with his troops when the war started? Yes, he was with his troops. He was in command of his troops. Was Salon? No. De Gaulle wisely pulled him away. And so, I mean, de Gaulle anticipated that there could be like a military coup attempt to overthrow what he was trying to do. And it was not successful. Okay? The thing that ended, that reached the agreement between the Algerians that started the process for the vote is called the Evian Accords. Do you see that in there? The Evian Accords from March 18th of 1962. So we're getting some like specific details. The group that tried the military coup attempt is the Secret Army Organization. If you see that in your notes as well, the Secret Army Organization was the attempted military coup after de Gaulle set things in place and so forth. They failed. Okay. Was de Gaulle ultimately very popular among the colons? What do you think, Melody? Do you think de Gaulle was ultimately popular among the, no. Because they thought he was going to be like for them. But ultimately he was for ending the war. And the war did end. And he wasn't that, and they weren't that excited about it. One of the things that's interesting, a couple things that happen as you get to the end of the war. Okay? France leaves, but they negotiate and keep a relationship, a positive relationship to a degree, with the new government in Algeria. So they've got still some military bases and so forth there. Okay? Because there's going to be, I mean, if you look at the history of Algeria, after Algeria gains its independence, does Algeria have any problems? Well, you might be able to anticipate some of it. Were the left-wingers really happy with how things turned out? Did they get to be in charge? No. And there's another group of people in Algeria. And those of you guys who are familiar with history since 9/11, these would be Islamists. These would be people in Algeria who are like, we're Muslim, and we're Muslim the right way. We want an Islamic-based governmental system. And they're going to be the biggest challenge to the Algerian government. Oh, and guess where sometimes they carry out their terrorist attacks? Not only in Algeria, but also in France. Yeah, because they're like, hey, France, you've got a positive relationship with the Algerian government, da, 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 da. Probably the people who hated the result the most coming out of this war are, first, the colons. Okay? It's kind of like, think back, actually, I didn't get the chance to teach you in ninth grade, but in the American Revolution, everybody know, what is the name of the people who were supportive of the British? Everybody know the name of the people, the loyalists? Have you heard of the term Tories? Yeah. So, like, if you were a Tory, you supported the British during the American Revolution, where does that leave you at the end of the American Revolution? I mean, just like, are those patriot neighbors of yours going to be like, hey, let's make up and, like, I'll be friends and neighbors in this new United States of America? I mean, where do they go? What do they do? In this country, when this country was formed, Tories, a lot of them left. They went up to Canada or they got on boats to Britain, and some of them, I mean, had been born in, the colonies. If you're a French colon, what do you do when Algeria becomes independent? You leave. 900,000 of them left. Most all of them did. And they went back to France, and they weren't too happy with de Gaulle, but I mean, wait a minute, de Gaulle was on the side of 91% of the population who was in favor of Algerian independence, but these guys aren't happy about it. The FLN kind of like slammed the door on their butts on the way out. They were basically, here was the expression, you may leave in with a suitcase or in a coffin. That's not very subtle. There were roughly maybe about 100,000 that chose to stay, but in the subsequent years, like within the next decade or so, most of them had left as well. They found that the situation was just not the way it was when France was in charge of Algeria. They were like seen as almost like foreigners in Algeria. Okay? What about the Harkis? What about the Harkis? If you're a Muslim and you're loyal to the French government, where does that leave you at the end? Daniel, if you were a Harki, what would you do? Would you stick around? Get on a boat? Go where? Go to France. Many of them went to France. Write that down. And it's really weird because it's almost like a reminder to the French population that these are people who were with us during a time that we failed. I mean, you see that sometimes in countries. Refugees coming over. There were between roughly 91,000 Harkis flee, come to France. They're going to have various different challenges because it's like they were living in a Muslim country and so forth. Now they're living in France. France is fascinating. When you look at France, there's all kinds of different heritage and so forth that comes through. And sometimes there's like real racial issues and so forth. Here's one thing that brings the French together, though. The World Cup. Is France good in World Cup soccer competitions? The French national team is good. They've actually won some World Cups. And part of the reason they will win World Cups is because they got really good athletes. And what is the national ethnic heritage of a significant component of the French World Cup victory teams? Yeah, you got some from the African colonies and so forth. One of the Zinedine, who was like a really, I'm probably mispronouncing that, is a really good French soccer player. He has heritage from Algeria. Okay? Between 50,000 to 150,000 Harkis died, though, in the fight and the aftermath in Algeria. They were not really welcome to stay. And that's always going to be a big, big challenge for those guys. Okay? So, I think we covered all of the various different components. I've got some other things going on here, but I think we got the gist of what was going on with that in the war and the independence in Algeria. So, yeah, you guys feel pretty good about that? That's good, yeah. And we've got like a minute to spare. Yeah. So Charles de Gaulle. Woo!